Rightio. Michael Jenkins here again, just giving a very quick 5-minute rundown into filing procedures required for planning and building approval. So this is particularly for the external students because the video that I took in the first class didn't work out, so I'm just doing this very short video to help supplement the information a little. So currently you'll probably be working on task 1 and task 2 for project 1. As you go through that, you'll need to record all of the information that you're finding. So you'll be looking at the council website and looking at SA Map UX, etc., and other sources to gather information on the property. That you want to be collating all that information from the word right from the start, and continue to collate that information as you work through your project. Very important part of drafting, being that we're in the business of communication, is to keep all of that information and communication, keeping those sources as they were at the point at which you produced the documentation. So we've got some processes for doing that. You'll see in this section here, under the Learn page, industry standards and instructions. So you'll be referring to that fairly often, particularly at the start of this semester. And under that, you'll see that I've put in here a screenshot of a filing example. That filing example is basically the folders all exploded for the filing system for a typical project. And what I'm expecting is that you'll make up a filing system like this for a typical project without adding any information to it and setting it aside as a filing system which you can, as a template essentially, that you can grab for each project and put into your general filing system for this subject. So you'll leave one template set of folders completely open, completely unpopulated, and then copy that set of folders and then paste them into the folder for each project, so to speak. So you don't have to do this over and over again. And that's also a very important part of both this subject and your work in general, is that you work in a very efficient manner, that you don't give yourself tasks that you do over and over again unless you absolutely need to. So this screenshot of the filing example is basically the recipe. You'll arrive at something very similar to this if you follow the steps that are laid out in the filing protocol for the planning approval. So I'll quickly open that up so you can see what's in that. So I've set out here, it's set into stages. So you start layering your folders, and you can muck around with this a little bit. I don't mind if you tailor this to your own likes, but what it has to do at the end of the day is make sense. So it has to be functional, and it has to make sense to somebody who's not necessarily initiated into that filing system that you have. So somebody could walk in and still be able to navigate it because it's based on logic, basically. So follow these steps. I won't bore you with going through it, but you can follow that through, and you'll end up with something fairly much akin to this. You'll notice I've added a few other things. I've added things like facilities, etc. And then also another thing that one of the students in this class has suggested is, because we have pieces of information that may be relevant in various different sections, say communication with council, it's relevant to communications, but also relevant to council. You might want to have a section in here in council where you provide a link back to communication with council under communications, for example. So it's not just about putting in folders, but you can also put in links to folders. So someone searching this may not find the original document, but they'll find a link to the original document in the location that is logical. So that's one thing that you have to get. It's mandatory that you set up that filing system, because you'll be handing that up later whenever you hand up your project, and also for store and retrieve documentation, you have to hand up screenshots of your expanded filing system. like this. So it's something that you'll need to start or get into practice today to start putting all that information in for that project. So go through the filing protocol and compare your expanded lot of files to mine, and see if there's anything you want to add or change, etc. Beyond that, you'll also have here we've got an activity log. So you see in my filing example there, under accounts, I've got the activity log for JSmith 0220, which is the name of my that file. That activity log must be maintained. The purpose of an activity log is to record all the time that you've spent working on a project. So you can charge that out essentially. Now your client may, you may present your client with a bill of $4,500 and they may be happy to pay that without asking questions, but it's not always the case. Sometimes you have clients who say, well, where have you spent all that time? Why are you charging me out for that so much time? And it's because this sort of work some people think is very, very automatic and non-time consuming. So if you keep your activity log, you're able to express to your client, this is how much time I've spent on every single portion of that, but it also helps you organise that for yourself to ensure that you're charging correctly. You're charging high amounts for jobs that take a lot of work and lower amounts for jobs that take less work. And it helps you understand exactly, helps you quantify what you're worth. So you'll have to start completing that activity log, and I suggest start completing that activity log straight away. As you're doing task 1 and task 2 for project 1, of course you're doing research which is required for that project. So you can bill for that time. So start putting that in your activity log, filling out your activity log. Underneath that, there's also a filing log. You won't be needing this unless you're doing building approval. So this is part of the cluster of subjects. So the filing log more pertains to the movement of manual files when you've got a piece of paper that changes from one hand to another. Your activity log, as it stands in planning approval, has some filing log aspects within it. Now, once again, feel free to add to this activity log if you feel that there's anything you want to add to it, but I encourage that you don't go taking things out of the activity log. So at a bare minimum, you use it as it's designed, but you can add a few things into it as well if you think you want additional functionality of that. So all the best, and as usual, if you've got any queries about this, please let me know. And I hope to be in contact with you soon for the Skype sessions. Thank you.